What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to the Struggle to Strength podcast, your source for real life application on how to turn your struggles into strengths in all things mind, muscle, and money. So cool. Yeah, let's get into it, man. Like we know a little bit about your story, but obviously the listeners, they'll read your guest bio, but they would love to know a little bit more. So let's dive in and let's go deep. Let's talk about some shit we haven't talked about.
Love it, bro. Awesome, right, man.
Yeah. So tell us about yourself and like where you come from and how you got to where you are today.
Absolutely. First, thanks for having me, Josh and Travis. I really appreciate it. And I'm excited. I'm going to share my story today, but like you said, I really want to get in depth with the experience and the lessons I've learned along the way, because I truly believe that every single setback in life is how we grow, is how we actually become a better version of ourselves. You truly do not grow unless you go through difficult times in your life. And you don't have to go through cancer, but what I'm trying to say is any setback you go through, that's where you have that true, breakthroughs in your life. So for me, I'm 30 years old now. At 24 years old, I go back to a specific date, and you guys will understand it a little bit, but it's St. Patrick's Day of 2016. And this is the day that I met my now fiance, Lauren. And we met on St. Patrick's Day. It was a great day. And as the summer started going, spring started finishing, summer started going, we were doing all these fun summer activities, things like that. And all of a sudden I started to notice these minor back pains. And for me at the time, I'm a personal trainer working out 6 days a week, counting my macros, doing all these healthy activities, being pretty much I'm the epitome of health. And for me, I'm just like, you know what? At 24 years old, I'm fine. It's probably something to do with lifting. I'll just shrug it off. And this is very common for, us young adults is, when something arises, we kind of like to just say, hey, we'll deal with it later. And, if it keeps coming up, we'll be fine. So for me, it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And it got to the point where I couldn't work out anymore. I was still too stubborn to go to a doctor. And one night, it was about 2 months later, once I started the symptoms in June. So in August, I woke up and I started puking up blood. I got rushed to the emergency room. They did a blood test on me, and they found out that I was losing about 2/3 of the blood circulating in my body, which is equivalent to being shot with a gun. So immediately, they give me 6 bags of blood. They rush me into an emergency surgery because they have no idea what's causing this. And they first thought it was an ulcer that was like causing the bleeding in my stomach. So the next day I wake up, it's just me and my parents at the time. And my doctor, he walks in, and all of a sudden there's just this blank stare in his eyes. And for me, I'm thinking, I was ready to go home until I saw that. And he walks over, he grabs my hand and he goes, Matt, we found an 11-centimeter tumor in your small intestine. We know it is cancerous, but we just don't know what type it is yet. And we have to rush you to the main campus of the Cleveland Clinic. So I was at a local hospital at the time. And literally from being this healthy individual where I never would have thought, being sick, my life just took a complete 180. But here's what I want to kind of emphasize here. And here's a little saying that has really stuck with me. It wasn't with me at the time, but I really learned to grow with this. And it's everything in life happens for you, not to you. And I'm sure you guys have heard a similar thing, or maybe even this exact thing. And here's how the best way I can explain it. You are going to get unfair news in your life, some way or another, relationship, financial reasons, your health. No matter what, there is going to be challenging news, but it's how you deal with that news. It's not the challenges in the experience, because those are going to automatically happen. It's how you mentally, emotionally, and physically deal with them. So you can either say, why is this experience happening to me? Making excuses, becoming the victim, having a why me mindset, getting you absolutely nowhere. Or you could say, how is life happening for me? That's when you can start saying, listen, I am grieving. There is a time and place where I'm upset, and that is totally fine. But there's also a time and place where I need to learn to move on. I need to learn to say, how is this happening for me? What is the lesson that this is bringing in my experience? And ultimately, not only will it help you grow into a better version of yourself, but it will ultimately allow you to have a new purpose in helping other people as well. You want to know how to really, a lot of people are like, I don't know what my purpose is in life. I don't know what my calling is in life. You want to know a good example of what your calling, your purpose is, or a good path to start looking at is something you've overcome that is meaningful to you, that you can now give back and serve other people. that to me is like my soul mission now, is giving back through my experiences, giving back through my setbacks, giving back through all of the stuff I went through. So if you're looking for where do I go next, start looking at something that you either are extremely passionate about or something you've overcame and is very meaningful to you. So that was really a tough pill to swallow though. You know, you're 24 years old. And I remember looking at my parents when I got diagnosed and they're crying. And for me, as this male, especially us male, we feel like we need to be strong during difficult times. Like we can't share our emotions. Vulnerability is not a good thing. You know, showing weakness, that's showing like a lack of strength. And I held that on to me for probably at least a few days until finally Lauren, my girlfriend at the time, who we'd only been dating me for 2 months, came in. And I was so nervous because I didn't know if she wanted to still be with me, if she was going to leave me. It was just kind of a whirlwind. And all of a sudden I knew when she just started crying and basically said, I'm not leaving you throughout this entire journey, I just let everything go. And I want to tell you right now, you know, and this could be to women as well, but mostly men, stop holding in all of your emotions when you're going through some type of struggle in life. It is literally like every day, an extra piece of baggage, an extra piece of weight that is put onto your shoulders that you feel like, you know, if I do share this, well, I'm going to be weak or somebody's going to judge me. It's the complete opposite. Trust me, the people who actually care about you, people who love you, all they want to do is help. And that is how you can have that first step in healing yourself within. So for me, that was really my first step, was just literally crying for, gosh, I couldn't even tell you how long. And just knowing that not only will she be there, I have incredible support. And I knew this was going to be a hell of a fight, you know, moving forward. So I don't know if you guys have any questions yet or not, but I can keep going.
Damn.
Dude, that's wild, man. And the way that you think of, or in retrospect, I'm sure the way that now you think of this is probably different than you did in the moment. And, you know, I've been through my own medical battles myself, and I've realized that the more I go through, the more resilient I become, the better my thought process becomes as I'm going through them. And a lot of times I don't quite understand what you're saying until after the fact, or until I'm already in it. And I realize like, oh shit, I'm doing the thing. Like you mentioned, you know, looking at something that you've overcome, that you're passionate about, and that you want to help other people doing. I didn't realize I was doing that until I was already like pretty far along into it.
Yep.
And so a lot of times we're not really paying attention to what we're doing. We're just kind of going through the motions. And especially in that situation, a lot of times it feels like you're just putting one foot in front of the other. Like that's all you're doing to get through a day. So I'm curious to hear your perspective on this. Like, at what point did you realize that things were happening for you and not to you?
Yeah. So we'll backtrack just a tad bit to, honestly, you're 100% right, Matt. Because when you are in that moment, like there is a whirlwind of just like, oh my god,
overwhelming.
Yeah. You're in fight or flight mode.
Yeah.
That's what you are. You're in fight or flight mode. And I literally had to put on my hard cap and just say, what is today? That's it. Mm-hmm. When you talk about living in the present, like when there's a near death experience, literally like a life or death experience, and you have no option but to, if you dwell on the past, or all you're doing is constantly worrying about the future, and tomorrow's not guaranteed, it is going to get you absolutely nowhere. That is the meaning of living in the present. And you have to say, so for me, what I started to do, this is my gradual step to start having that mindset shift, was when I started chemotherapy. So immediately as I got diagnosed, they rushed me to the clinic. They did a bunch of tests on me, and that's where they found out I had the highest stage of testicular cancer. As soon as they found out I had the highest stage of testicular cancer, they immediately put me on what's called BEP, which is very intense chemotherapy. And usually even the most intense chemotherapy, they only put these guys on 4 rounds of. But mine was so advanced and spread all over my body that they ended up adding an extra round to it. So I'm going through chemotherapy. Within a week, I lost my hair. I'm so fatigued, so nauseous all the time. I can barely get out of bed half the time. And I just remembered that, like, I started to have this victim mindset, and I started to really get upset. One of the things that really triggered it was, if you've ever had like a pet, I know I had a 3-year-old puppy, and he was diagnosed with cancer literally as I was going through chemotherapy. And no joke, in the dead smack middle of chemo, he passed away from cancer. And I just like literally instantly broke down. And I was just like, this is where I was just like, God, like for me, I am a Christian. So I just started like blaming God. I kept saying, you're never going to give me a breakthrough. You're always doing this and that. And I went through that process for a good 5 to 6 days. And eventually I woke up one day and I was just like, it wasn't just like, oh, this epiphany where everything magically turned around, but I did have this like slight mindset of nobody here except for myself is going to be able to really save me. I am the one who has to make the change in my life. I am the one who has to take that first scary step forward. So what I said I was going to do is, what is one thing? This is it. Stop overcomplicating your process. What is one thing a day that is going to get you to where you need to be in life? It's almost like that Rome wasn't built in a day. It's the exact same concept when you're doing any other task in life. Focus on being simple in just one task a day. And ultimately, as you compound those one task, it's called winning the day. So I follow this guy who's named Andy Frisella. He's an entrepreneur, very motivational guy, but he calls it winning the day. And when you win the day and you win 5 of those 7 days, you ultimately win the week. When you win the week and you win 3 out of those 4 weeks, guess what that means? That means you've won the month. And eventually it compounds and compounds, and it builds momentum, it builds confidence, and it builds rituals and routines into your life. And when you have a ritual and routine, which can take a little bit, but it ultimately creates those, instead of you saying, I have to do this today, oh my gosh, I'm dreading this, it's I am doing this today. I get to do this today. I'm grateful that I have another day to do this, but it's small little compound effects every single day that'll get you to where you need to be. So that's what slowly switched my mindset to saying, stop becoming the victim and start looking at life is happening for you. And yes, I had many still ups and down roller coasters. There were days where I had just completely unexpected days where I could barely even make it to chemotherapy, things like that. And, but you had to just keep persevering for it, especially when it's a near death experience. So,
dude,
and you,
wild.
Yeah. You have a really interesting way of describing these things. And I say interesting because it's different than like slightly different than things that I've heard from other people, whether it's like people who have been on this podcast or just people in general. I think, like the finding out your purpose, living in the present, that sort of thing. It's interesting because you can tell that your perspective on those things is from somebody who's straight up been through it and discovered it on your own. And I think a lot of people kind of just like regurgitate information that they've heard about this type of thing. Mm-hmm. And you have like a very interesting, perspective on it that's clearly from someone who's like, this is from experience basically. And yeah, I appreciate that and just hope everyone's like paying attention. The thing about like finding your purpose like that, I've heard a lot of people say different things, but I've never quite heard it that way before, which is like, what have you been through? Yeah. Maybe it's not even like your favorite thing in the world, but like, what have you been through that you can help other people with? That's like huge.
Yeah. Like you got through something, you survived, you know?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And you're right. I'll be honest, cancer is not one of my favorite things in the world, but I will tell you this. You want to know what the most gratifying thing is when I get a text message from a cancer patient or survivor saying, hey, Matt, you changed my life. That right there is one of the most gratifying things in the world. So your purpose doesn't necessarily mean it's the most fun thing you've ever done in the world. It means that what you're helping people through will give you some of the most gratification, some of the most happiness, some of the most fulfillment into your entire life. And then once you start getting that momentum or you start, growing, then you can venture off into areas that are like hobbies and things that you love doing. But sometimes maybe it does start with something that you've gone through. And I appreciate that, man. And also you're right. The greatest, way you can teach somebody is through experience. And yes, you should read books, you should listen to podcasts, such as this, and you regurgitate information. But like the only way, this is what too many people do. They listen and they read and they take millions of notes, but they're too afraid to take action in life. They're too afraid of what that next person's going to say about them or their own failures. Or you want to know the biggest thing? their own success. They're too afraid that if I get too successful, that am I worthy enough? Self-worth, all of these things, man. And you cannot let those limiting beliefs control your life. Because when they start controlling your life, you start getting depressed. You start getting anxious. This is where mental health comes from, is people with lack of, yes, I understand there's chemical imbalances and things like this, but some people it's through lack of action and letting other people or their own limiting beliefs dictate their life. And that right there will cause you thinking that you are never going to be worthy enough for X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I heard a great quote of like what you just said about taking action. I heard a great quote from Jeff Bezos, actually. Like it was an interview with him recently, and they're like, you've built all this stuff. You must work so hard. Like you must be so stressed out and have a lot of anxiety in your life. And he's like, I actually have very little anxiety. Because he said like when he was starting out, he had a ton of anxiety. And what he realized is like all of his anxiety came from knowing that there was something that he should take action on that he wasn't. And that's where the anxiety was coming from. So he basically set up like a system in his life so that whenever there was something that he should be taking action on, he was always doing that. So his whole system is set around like controlling the controllables, as some people would say, but like just taking action on the things that he can. And then it leaves room to like not worry about the things that he can't. But I agree. I mean, I think what a lot of people run into is like, they're just not, there's a lot of things in their life that they should be doing that they're not.
Absolutely, man. I love that. Yeah. I've seen an interview with Bezos as well, where he says, literally, this is what he says. He's like, I literally only host or go into meetings that are literally like the big meetings for the day. Like only things that I can control and that are going to push the needle forward in my business. That's it. I'm working on the business, not in the business of literally pushing myself forward. So yeah, I love that concept. So yeah, man. So this is only part of the story. The real journey is actually after chemotherapy. So if you guys want me to get into those details, I can get into those.
Yeah, let's dive in, man. This has been great. Awesome.
Okay. So finished chemotherapy. It was about 3 to 3.5 months. And, it was an incredible feeling. It was almost like, I feel like I accomplished, Mount Everest. It was just a lot of ups and downs, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, things like that. And so I go to sit down with my oncologist about 2 weeks later, and he gets my test results back. And he's like, all right, we have some really good news and we have some challenging news. So the good news is your tumor, which was 11 centimeters, is now shrunk to 3 centimeters. Now, the rough part is your tumor is actually wrapped around what's called your inferior vena cava. Now, your inferior vena cava is basically a central vein that goes from the bottom of your upper body to your heart. He said, we're going to have about an 11 to 12 hour surgery to remove the vena cava, to remove the tumor, and to remove the rest of the cancer in your body. And here's this tough part is we have no idea what we're going to find in there. We don't know the complications, X, Y, and Z. So I literally had to wait 2 weeks after that. That was one of the most mentally draining 2 weeks of my life. Because I'm like, I just want to get this over with. Like, please, God, just like, let me get through this. And so I get the surgery and was an 11-hour surgery. They had 4 different surgeons involved. They had like a cardiologist, a urologist, a couple of, I couldn't even tell you all of them, but it was just a very, very complicated surgery. And going into that surgery, I was about 140 pounds. So I lost about 45 pounds during chemo. Coming out of that surgery, I was close to 200 pounds. So what had happened was I remember waking up about 3 days later and I couldn't really move. And when I started getting up off that bed, I noticed that all my body had just swollen up. So they had cut my stomach open from my left hip to my right hip. And when they did so, my body basically went to the survival mode and it just started swelling up. And I remember asking my doctor, I said, well, is the swelling going to drain? Because I had a draining tube. And he's like, yes, it should eventually drain. You should be okay. And you should start to gain that strength and everything back. Well, here's what happened. About a week and a half later, I'm out of the hospital. And when the draining is supposed to be coming out of the tube, it just stopped just like that. I'm in so much pain. They had me on Oxycontin. They had me on Percocet, was doing nothing. Get rushed to the emergency room, literally get into an ambulance right when they seen what was going on, rushed me to the main campus of the Cleveland Clinic again. And then they ended up having to drain 7 liters of fluid out of my stomach, where I ended up going into complete kidney and liver failure. I had a cone drilled inside my head to relieve potential brain swelling. I had a catheter in my chest. I had a catheter in my neck because they thought I was going to be on dialysis the rest of my life. And I fell into a 2-week non-induced coma.
Holy shit.
So this is where my faith really comes into play. Once again, I don't push faith on anybody, but I do, if it's okay, I do share my experience, of faith. If it's all right with you guys.
Yeah, of course.
So for me, my mom, always being a Christian, just very faith-based, she held these local prayer services while I was in my coma. And she held 3 local prayer services where, no joke, hundreds of people were praying for me at the church. What I was told was, no joke, thousands, like they had people praying around the world in prayer groups everywhere. And literally dead smack in the middle of my last, of the last prayer service was the day that I woke up from my coma. And it was actually the moment I woke up from my coma. And here's another story is Lauren. So you had Lauren and my parents who never left that room. They stayed in that room unless they had to go eat or shower or things like that. And Lauren, every single day, would come up to me. She'd hold my hand and just pray for healing, pray for me to wake up. And literally as she was praying on that day, holding my hand, was when she felt my fingers start to wiggle. And that's how she noticed me waking up. So she was the one who actually noticed it, ran over to the nurses. They didn't believe her. They got the surgeon in. He came in. And that's when they really found out that I was starting to wake up. And for me, it was almost like God saying, Matt, this isn't the end of your journey. This is a brand new beginning of something that I have for you. And I want to ask some people here who's listening, maybe you've hit rock bottom in some way or form in your life. And I want you to know that rock bottom is not necessarily a bad place. It's actually sometimes a place we have to get to in order to be able to make that shift. Because when we have nothing to lose, literally nothing to lose, the only place we can go is up. That is when you can truly make that change in your life. That is when you can truly make that shift in your life. And for me, it was just like, I got nothing to lose. I didn't even know what was really going on. And I knew that this was going to be an absolute battle. So, of course, you think, okay, the worst is over. And, he should be starting to heal now. Well, here's what happens. Week out of my coma, no joke. I'm still on a ventilator, things like that. They finally take the ventilator off of me. And they're starting to take one of the catheters out of my neck. As they go to take out one of the catheters in my neck, they're seeing some progress. I have what's called it's a 0.01% chance of this happening. I have what's called an arrhythm heartbeat, and I go into cardiac arrest. They have to do 8 minutes of CPR on me, where literally the whole entire ICU unit had to rush in to save my life. And I fell into another 1-week coma. Literally, here's the story. They're like, my parents were in the room at the time, so was Lauren, and they're like, just go downstairs, grab some lunch, and then just come back up. You'll be fine. We're just taking this out, but we have to just be like in the room. They come back up, and literally the whole unit is in there, and they're like, what is going on? And that is when they found out. And so I ended up being in now a seduced coma for an entire week, where they just monitored my heart rate, my blood pressure, everything like that. And after it's been about 3.5 weeks, I finally wake up and I'm back, not back, but I'm still in the ICU room, and it's now Valentine's Day. And I just remember waking up, seeing flowers, things like that. And I go to move, and I'm like, I literally cannot move. Like, I felt like I was paralyzed. I could talk and things like that, but I was so weak. My body was so diminished, or whatever you want to say, like literally had nothing left in it, that I had to learn to completely relive my entire life again. And no joke, for 2 weeks, it took me 2 weeks to get from laying in my bed to taking my very first steps again. And this is with 3 to 4 nurses every day helping me, just doing little exercises, sitting up. It started with sitting up from my bed. Then it started with standing for 20 seconds. And then it started with just taking that very first step. And it was a 2-week process. Finally, I get out of the ICU. I'm out of the ICU after, over a month. And I'm like, okay, I'm almost ready to go home. I have 1 week left in some recovery room. And no joke, literally as they're wheeling me out, not to go home, but to go into that last recovery room, I end up looking down. I had these stitches at this point with all the draining of the swelling and stuff like that. I'm now 4 surgeries in. I look at my stitches, they pop open, and I have to get rushed into a 5th major surgery in less than 35 days. And what they ended up having to do was called an open wound surgery on me. They had to basically open up my entire stomach, leave it open, which was a football-sized wound, and put a massive mesh over it. And just when I thought things were getting better, I was back in the ICU room. But here's the kicker. This is where I really think my life completely changed. You know, I woke up in that ICU room, ventilator in my mouth, hands tied to the bed because they didn't want me accidentally touching my wound if I woke up, and my feet were tied to the bed too. No joke. For 2 days, they didn't really know that I was awake enough. So I had to sit there for 2 days knowing that I was awake and literally like contemplating life. And I'm not even kidding you. When I finally got up off that bed, I walked further than I'd ever done previous to the ICU room, previous to that past recovery room. And, you know, after 53 days in the hospital, over 40 plus days in the ICU, I was finally released from the hospital. And the day I was released from the hospital was March 17th of 2017. Exactly 1 year from when I met my now fiance, Lauren, who was, I'm not even kidding you, like the guardian angel in my life. She hadn't even been dating me for a year yet. And she stayed all 53 days in those hospitals. She'd wake up at 6 a.m. to literally like fight the nurses because you couldn't see me till 7, but she had to go to work, come back and sit and literally she couldn't talk to me because I couldn't talk. And it was just like, she was pretty much my everything. So my last little thing is wow. Figure out who that person is in your life that, you know, when shit hits the fan, like they're going to be there for you. And we tend to take them for granted a lot of times. And we can just, you know, say, oh, they're in our lives and when we need them, we'll have them. But no, show your appreciation today. If you know who that person is, shoot them a text, give them a call, and it'll really mean the world to them. So that was kind of the whole up and down journey right there.
Damn.
Dude, that is wild. I mean, like, that is just wild. Like every time you thought you were getting out, it was just another one. I can't even imagine, you know, the mental toll that takes on you, of especially to not be thinking like, why me? Like, geez, like, please just let me out of this. And then it keeps on coming. It reminds me, it goes back to like, you know, identifying that one thing each day that will help you move forward. Sometimes it's not even a big thing. Sometimes it's like the simplest reframe of the way that you talk to yourself. And that's what gets you through that day. And we've talked about how important that was. What I know, like, obviously your faith, your family, your fiance, there's got to be a lot of other F's that go along with that, but like, there's got to be a lot of things that did get you through those hard times. I mean, did you struggle with negative self-talk during those times, and how did you overcome that?
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Every day was a mental battle. You know,
I can't even imagine.
So I guess it's kind of sad, but funny. The one good thing about the hospital that maybe helped me mentally was it was sad because I wasn't Matt. Like, people were like, I pray to God that Matt gets back to like himself at some point in his life. Meaning, like, I was so drugged up, dude. I was so like depleted with everything going on. I had dropped down, by the way. I dropped down. Remember I said I was 200 pounds? In that matter of 53 days, I was 110 pounds coming out of that hospital. 110 pounds. I lost all the weight because I couldn't eat anything. Yeah. All I could do, and this was the worst part, I couldn't literally drink any liquid. They had to either give me like swabs with like a sponge, or they had to give it to me through an IV. It is the worst feeling in the world. So I lost all this weight. Where the real mental struggle came was when I finally was able to start like grasping everything I just went through. And that was when I started getting out of the hospital and I had to rebuild my life again. Like coming out of the hospital, 110 pounds, like, it's not like, oh, you're out of the hospital. Okay, awesome. Time to live your life again. No, I was going to physical therapy every single day. Well, not going. I had somebody come into my house because I could barely even get back into the car. So I had somebody come into my house, helping me with physical therapy. I had nurses changing my wound 3 times a week. And I was just like in this mental battle, man. And I'm not even kidding you. I went to this complete victim mindset the first 2 weeks out of that hospital, because guess what? I didn't have the accountability of doctors every single day coming into my room. Like when you're at a hospital, they're constantly coming saying, okay, Matt, time to get up, time to do this, time to do that. Well, I did have physical therapy and I did have X, Y, and Z, but I still was able to have that time to myself. And that's when the deep and dark thoughts started coming in. And no joke, 2 weeks out of that hospital, I was back into the I had to go back to the hospital because I had a standing heart rate of 150 beats a minute. My blood pressure was like absolutely through the roof. My temperature was actually at 104 degrees. It was because I stopped like taking care of myself. I went to this complete depressed, like victim mindset. And when I finally came out of it, I had this really tough but needed conversation, not just with myself, but with Lauren. And we basically came to the conclusion that if I do not start turning my mind, my body, and getting back to really taking care of myself, I will most likely not be here next month. No joke. It was a life or death experience. And like I was saying before, when you're at rock bottom and you really don't have anywhere else to go, like your ass better get in gear and start taking one step at a time. That's all I did. I literally focused on one thing at a time because, as I said before, health was a massive part of my life. And I'm like, I got to get back to the roots. So what do I need to do? Well, let's start to when did I start? Like, what did I start doing when I just started lifting? I just focused on little, small movements. And for me, it was just literally doing bicep curls. That's all I could do at the time. I couldn't like lift heavy weights. I could lift a 2.5 pound dumbbell and I started doing bicep curls. Then I would set lawn chairs up. No joke. I'd set a lawn chair up at one end of my driveway, set it up at the other. I'd walk to that chair, take about a minute break, and then walk back. You know what I do the next day? I just move that lawn chair just a little bit further, just a little bit further. It's just like anything in life. Move the needle a little bit further. And that is what got me out of that victim, why me mindset. And this is when I truly started to say, how is life happening for me? How is all of this shit I'm going through turning into lessons and turning into something to, at the point, being a better version of myself? I was nowhere near, I want to help people yet, but it was bettering myself. Because this is one of my favorite things. And this is the best way I can explain it. You probably heard, in order to be selfless, you must be selfish first. This is the best way I can explain it. If you cannot take care of yourself, how do you ever expect to have somebody else listen or you be able to help those people through the challenges or through the experiences you've gone through? So you must be selfish first in order to be selfless for others.
Dude, this hits so hard for me because, I mean, granted, what you've been through is far more severe than most of what anything I've been through or anybody I know. But the process coming out of it seems so similar to anybody who's had a near-death experience or something incredibly unfortunate like this happen. The accountability of being in the hospital once you're out, that's not something that they prepare you for. You're out of the hospital, you're on your own now. And you're not going to have people come and bring things to you. There's going to be a little bit less help, but the accountability to take care of yourself isn't there. And then to hear about how you got back into your health. I was into health and fitness before some of my really significant surgeries. And all I was doing was trying to figure out how I was going to get back there. I was planning my comeback. They say the comeback's always greater than the setback. And I was just planning my comeback. And during that time, I realized that this is something that I was passionate about, that I was overcoming. And once I really got to where I wanted to be in terms of just on a path of improvement, not necessarily where my end goal was, but I've had some momentum built. I realized that, this is something that I want to do. I do want to help other people with this. So all of these horrible things that happen to us, you're right, they happen for us in a lot of ways because we're going to get bad news either way. So I think a lot of times when we go through these really difficult struggles, these really challenging adversities, reframing that, even if it's hard in the moment, at least in retrospect, to what is the universe trying to tell me? What am I supposed to learn from this? How is this supposed to positively impact my life? Is one of the most important things we can do. That's how people find their way. So it sounds like you've gone through so much, a lot. Like the story, like honestly, it just kept going. I was like, even as listening to the story, I'm like, all right, that's got to be it. Like he's like, I was like rooting for you. I'm like, that's got to be it. He's good. No, not again. And that you're here, you overcame that is just incredible. And so like, I'm glad to hear that you're sharing this with other people, because you don't, like you said, a rock bottom mindset isn't a terrible place to be. You don't have to go there though.
No.
You can be proactive. So I guess what advice do you have for people who maybe haven't hit a rock bottom moment, or who don't want to, and granted, like totally understandable, you don't want to, but who still want to find this passion and this purpose in their life?
Of course, the best time to start is it's right now.
Right now.
Best time to start is right now. Stop letting your past dictate your future. Too many people let their past like failures define who they are in life. If you're going to keep letting that define, then you are going to hit rock bottom. You are going to hit rock bottom if you just keep letting your past define you. You're going to hit depression. You're going to hit PTSD. You're going to hit all this anxiety. You're going to hit all this self, worth, like you're not worthy enough. And stop letting the future. So it's good to plan for the future, but don't let the future dictate the anxious thoughts or, well, if I do this, what could happen? No, start now. Take what's called imperfect action, meaning action while failing along the way, and realize that your growth and your lessons and your actual like breakthroughs are going to come when you start taking that scary first step. Like I know every single person listening to this has done something that is super scary to them. And when they got onto the other side, they're like, oh my gosh, like, why didn't I do this sooner? Why didn't I just take this step? I made this false story in my head of all of the worst case scenarios. Because that's what basically anxiety is. You take a story and you amplify it to the worst possible scenario. And you think that, and you literally you don't just think it, you convince yourself that that's what's going to happen if you go that route. Oh, if I take this risk financially and it doesn't work out, I will be living on the streets for the rest of my life. My parents will disown me. My wife or my kids will never want to talk to me again. I'll never have any friends, and I'll die a lonely person, homeless on the street. That's what people go to. It's not going to happen. Trust me, you won't let yourself do that. So start today, simplify the process, one task at a time, take action, and whatever lessons or knowledge you get, just keep retaining it. It's called infobesity, meaning you retain unnecessary information to make yourself feel better. Instead, take that information and then act upon it. That'll help.
I love that. And I love the way that you've been kind of like just sharing your story and what you've learned from it. I think that a lot of people could learn something from you. And I think a lot of people also want to create a similar impact. Like when it comes down to it, yeah, we want to be happy, but we want to make other people happy too. We want to make a positive impact on the world. We want to leave it better than we found it. We want to leave like a legacy. And so as someone who's doing that, and I'd say very effectively, what advice would you give to others? Like, how do we create a story so impactful and share like an impactful message with the world?
Yeah, awesome. I really, really like that. So I have an acronym and I really like it. It's HOPE. And I learned it from a guy named Jim Quick. And
oh yeah, I know Jim
Quick. It's HOPE. Help one person every day. And what that is don't ever underestimate the power of helping one person. It's a snowball effect. As you help one person, you're not just helping that person. That person is gaining your knowledge to then go and share it to another person. So as you help 10 people, you're actually more likely helping like 100 people. As you help 100 people, you're more likely helping 1,000 people. So don't ever underestimate what your story can do to impact somebody's life by just even sharing it with one person at a time. Because a lot of people are like, oh, I need to get on these massive stages right away. I need to do all these grand things. No, you just need to start with one person. Change their life first. See how you feel. Get the feedback from them, and then just keep going forward with it. And I think for our story, the best way I can say that I broke it down to, when I first started sharing it, I was all over the place. And everybody, when you first start sharing your story, it gets more specific. You start to learn as you just get out there and start sharing, because the more you share it, then you realize what people really want to understand. and what people are like, oh, okay, that's good, but I maybe didn't need to hear about this. And for me, it was just like, it was more like the story, but it's the lessons that I provide. Because the coolest part is I can go to any speaking engagement and I will share the same story. It's not about the story, it's about the lessons that you change. So if I go to like a corporation, I'm going to teach people how to overcome limiting beliefs. I'm going to teach people how to become a better version of themselves. I'm going to teach people how to use all of their pain that they're going through to become the person they want to be and help the hundreds or thousands of people that they want to help in their life. Now, if I go to a testicular cancer organization, which I was thankful to be able to do last year, I don't talk about that. I talk more about overcoming cancer. I talk more about using a lot of the struggles they're going through. So it's when you're sharing your story, craft your message. Your story can be the same, but craft your message and lessons around your audience. That is how you will make the true impact in their life. And get it 3 to 5. You don't have to go crazy. 3 to 5 big lessons, and just dive in on those and get really deep and get really, specific on how you want to help those people.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And I really like that acronym too. And it that was something that I think when Travis and I first started the podcast and we started sharing our stories, we realized that we didn't have a huge audience. We still don't have a massive audience, but definitely not where we want it to be. We have a lot of room to grow and we're excited for that. But even with a small audience, it doesn't matter how many followers you have. It doesn't matter how many people you have that are listening to what you have to say. If one person is, we've had people reach out to us and say that, we've really impacted their lives with an episode. And I'm like, well, shit, I didn't even know people were listening to this at that time. It was like when we first started, but you're right. It doesn't take a lot, but that feedback feels really good. It's very fulfilling. So I know that's something I want to do. I know it's something Travis wants to do. And so it doesn't take much, but just one person. And as like you're saying, you get to refine that story, you get better at telling it, it becomes more impactful. I'm sure that now today, the way that you tell your story to us is a lot more concise, a lot more impactful than it was the first time you told it.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
It's just practice.
It's just practice. It's like, this going to the gym, man, your first time at the gym, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm sore. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't even know what these weights mean, all this thing. But as you go consistently, consistency builds the muscle, helps you get to where you want to be physically, helps you get to where you want to be with your health in general. It's no different than hitting the weights or going and doing cardio or taking care of your body with your nutrition or your sleep. It's consistency every day. Because if you just go to the gym once a week, you're never going to really see progress. It's just like same thing with doing something big with your life. You only do it once a week, you're not going to see the progress you need. You need to be consistent with it, and you need to stay at it so that your mind is fresh and you know where you're going. So,
Yeah, man. Well, dude, I've really enjoyed this story. I've really enjoyed all the lessons that you've learned from it. Really aligned in a very odd way with a lot of things I went through and how I overcame them too. And with some other people that we've talked to, it's like the lessons are the same. Like how we got to them might have been different, but the lessons that we've learned are the same. And I really enjoyed the way that you explained them. So I really appreciate you coming on, man. This has been a phenomenal conversation. I know that our listeners are definitely going to want to follow you, learn more about you. So why don't you, if you could leave us with just some last words and tell us kind of where you are, where we can find you, your social media, give yourself the plug.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll make it really quick. I know we're at time crunch. So you can find me. So really quick, you can find me on Instagram at MATTY_ODE. You can find me on Facebook at Matt Ode. If you are going through cancer or been impacted by cancer, I created a Facebook group with all cancer patients, survivors, and caregivers. We've now grown in just 1 year to over 6,000 members in the group. It's just mind blowing, just pure love, support, and help for one another. And if you are looking to get more information, you can also check out my YouTube channel as well at Matt Ode. And I guess my final message really quick to you is I'll leave with another acronym, and that is fear. You can either fear everything and run or face everything and rise. It's your decision. It's your choice. Make it today and become the better version of yourself.
Wise words to live by, Matt. And I appreciate that again. So thank you again for coming on. And thank you everybody for tuning in to another episode of the Struggle to Strength podcast. We will see y'all next week.